Hey, it's Chris from Catalyst, and today we're talking about macronutrient timing. What are macronutrients? Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And today we're going to talk about how they affect your blood sugar and what that means for you for the long term, for weight loss, avoiding illness, pursuing wellness, and pursuing fitness. So first, we want to talk about baseline blood sugar, and this is the level at which you feel alert, you're not dozy, you're not tired, you've got enough blood sugar to meet your energy requirements, but no more than that. And what happens when we eat carbohydrates? When we have carbohydrates, our blood sugar level rises. More complex carbohydrates, like vegetables, will cause a slow rise in blood sugar, and this is what we want, because when our blood sugar rises, our pancreas secretes insulin to bring it back to baseline. And so when it's rising nice and slowly, insulin comes out, blood sugar decreases back to baseline, and we get this nice smooth arc. Barely noticeable. You would hardly even know that you've just eaten or that your blood sugar level has come up at all. When we eat simple carbs, sugars, processed grains, white bread, pasta, what happens is a really quick spike in blood sugar because you can break those carbs down really quickly, and so you get all this sugar just dumped in your blood. And a reminder that a carbohydrate is just a whole bunch of sugars packed together. So, what happens instead of this nice gradual rise is a big spike. Okay, and an upward trending curve. The problem is that our pancreas doesn't know when the sugar will stop being dumped into the blood, and so it overreacts. And it spikes too, and insulin piles up really quickly. And instead of this nice gradual return to baseline, all that insulin just bulldozes that blood sugar wherever it can. And we wind up with lower than baseline blood sugar levels, hypoglycemia. Okay? So we've secreted too much insulin because our body, our pancreas, wasn't sure when these levels were going to stop rising. What happens when you're hypoglycemic? Well, you're starving, you're tired, you're understimulated, you feel bored, and your first response is, man, I gotta eat something sweet. I feel like I'm dragging here, okay? So this rebound effect causes you to eat something sweet. I really need something sugary. I am craving sugar. And so you spike right back up again. And then what happens with your insulin level? Well, of course, it follows. Boom, up it goes again. And you tend to ride this crazy roller coaster all day. Now, given time, this effect is the primary cause of type 2 diabetes. You become less insulin sensitive. So your body downgrades its insulin receptors, and so when you get these big waves of insulin caused by inactivity and eating high glycemic carbs, your body doesn't respond as well over time. Okay, it downgrades those receptors so that when it is time for insulin to do its real work, your body doesn't respond as well. And that's type 2 diabetes. So, how can we avoid these big spikes? There are a couple of ways. First off, eating more complex carbs will help. But even a complex carb, eaten by itself, will break down relatively quickly. Instead, by putting macronutrients together, by eating proteins and maybe fats with carbs, we can slow down the absorption rate so that even a carb that might cause a big blood glucose spike won't be able to break down as quickly, and that effect will be numbed because your body has to break down the protein, which is harder to break down, and or the fat, which is really hard to break down. So we get this nice wave rolling effect again. The simplest way to make sure you're not having insulin spikes is to never eat carbs by themselves, and that includes fruit. A lot of people who are really insulin sensitive, like me, if you eat fruit by itself, you'll notice about 30 minutes later that you feel tired. And that's the reciprocal effect of insulin causing low blood sugar. Macronutrient timing means having protein and fat with your carbs whenever you eat. So you get this nice, easy baseline. And Dr. Barry Sears in his book, Enter the Zone, describes this as, the ultimate zone. And the way that you can tell if you're in the zone is that 3 hours later you feel hungry but not really tired. Okay? You're going to have to play around with this a little bit. The flip side of this is, what if I eat protein or fats by themselves? What happens to my blood sugar then? Well, because you don't easily break those things down, and in fact, you can't break down protein with insulin, your blood sugar actually dips a little bit. Okay? So you have to pull the sugar out of the blood to secrete, to trigger the insulin response so that you can break those things down. And what pulls the sugar out of the blood is a different chemical called glucagon. Okay? So to process a protein or a fat by itself without a carbohydrate in the mix, your blood sugar will actually decrease with glucagon. Glucagon will pull sugar out of the blood, triggering an insulin spike, so that the pancreas can react with insulin. Insulin will rise, and we'll get either a wave effect or more likely spikes and dips. What's the moral of the story here? Whenever you have a meal, try and balance carbohydrates with a protein or a fat, or ideally all three. And the best lecture Barry Sears ever gave was his live lecture in 2006 when he described exactly how much you should have at a time. This will take some playing around with, but in general, if you start with this, the hand model, and you eat about this much protein, the size of your palm, so a smaller person will eat less, and you have about this much carbohydrate, okay, the size of your whole hand, if you're having vegetables, which is what we want, and about this much fat, the size of your thumb. If you look, that's about the same size as maybe 6 or 8 almonds, just enough. Start with that. Eat that meal 5 or 6 times a day. If you have a smaller meal, like just an apple, try and have some fats or proteins with it to balance out that insulin spike. This is not all the dietary strategy you'll ever need, but this is a great place to start. And once you've got this foundation, you can apply any strategy you want over top.